Well, we are live. Hello out there in television land. For all of you that are joining us, wherever you may be around the world, we welcome you here. It's a beautiful Sunday morning here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we are studying the book of Exodus. And today we are in our 10th class, and we are in Exodus chapter 10, verses 1 through 29. And we are studying the plagues of Egypt, or the judgments against Egypt. And today we're going to look at the 8th and the 9th plagues. Just to refresh your memory, here's what we've covered so far. There will be a 10th plague. We'll get into that next week. But the first plague, God turned the Nile River to blood and turned all the surface water in Egypt to blood. Made it very difficult for people, obviously, to get water to live with, to cook, to clean, everything else. The second one, God had frogs hopping all over the place in Egypt. The third one, God took the dust of the earth and turned it into gnats and lice, and they just got all over people and caused all kinds of diseases and whatnot. The fourth one was flies, lots and lots and lots of flies. I was at a horse place this week, and there were lots of flies there, so I understand that flies can bother not only us, but can bother animals as well. So, flies all over Egypt. Next one was livestock that were left outside, died. Livestock that were brought in by people who believed what Moses said, protected. Jewish livestock was protected. Next one was boils. Boils showing up on people's skins and just being extremely painful, such that people can hardly function. And the last one we studied last week was the hail that came down, and if you were outside and the hail hit you, you died. So again, it was a reason to get inside. Moses told people to get inside. The people that did were fine. God blessed them, God took care of them, and then God also took care of the Jewish people. But the ones who were outside and didn't believe in God, they died from the hail. So this week we're going to look at the next two. The 8th plague is the plague of locusts. And the 9th plague is the plague of darkness. We're going to get into those here. And then next week we're going to talk about we're going to begin talking about the 10th plague, which is the plague of the death of the firstborn children. So I'm going to start with locusts. I want to talk to you first of all about a few things about locusts before we actually get into the story. I'll get into the story in a few minutes. Locusts are very, very interesting critters. They're mentioned 36 times in the Bible, so they're pretty common. You see them in a lot of places around the Bible. By the way, the primary places that they're really mentioned are in Revelation and in Joel. We'll talk about those a little bit later. Locusts are kind of like grasshoppers, but they're different from grasshoppers. Most of the time, they're just out there doing their thing, like grasshoppers, hopping around. But every now and then, they get together, and when they get together, they have back legs on them, and their back legs, they start rubbing together. And as they rub their back legs together, they make a sound. And that sound attracts other locusts. And then the locusts begin to come together, and it makes them do a few things. One of them it makes them do is breed. Locusts start all of a sudden breeding with each other when they hear this sound going on. Another thing it does is it gets them very excited. And it's called the gregarious phase, where they get excited and they just get... And the more they get excited, the more they rub their back legs together, and the more they rub their back legs together, the more they breed, and the more they get excited, and on and on and on and on and on, until all of a sudden there are billions of them all just swarming around. So they go in swarms. There's no king to them. Unlike bees, there's no leader, no general, no king. They just kind of mindlessly are out there doing their thing in gigantic swarms. There's nobody leading them at all. It's just, when they're in their gregarious phase, they just attack everything. They're just buzzing and busying and scraping, and rubbing their legs and just doing the whole 9 yards. They're known for destruction, just total destruction. Locusts come in giant clouds, giant swarms, and when they come in, and they land someplace, anything that's green is just devoured. They devour everything that's green, and they devour everything that's alive. You wouldn't want to be out in the middle of locusts. They would be all over you, devouring you. Mm-hmm. And when they move on, eventually, everything is gone. It's all dead. typically they're in the billions when they swarm. Billions of locusts. That's how fast they breed. Billions of locusts. By the way, locusts live about 30 days once they're born. When they hit their full density is about 80 million to 200 million per square kilometer. Now, a square kilometer is a lot smaller than a square mile, so that's, I don't know how many acres a square kilometer is, but imagine 80 to 200 million of these things. They say the ground can get so dark that you can hardly even see the ground underneath it from the locusts. As I say, they breed exceptionally quickly, and the locust judgment here is very, very prophetic of what we're going to see as we study the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation, the locust judgment, is the fifth trumpet judgment. And also Joel talks about that same judgment in a number of places. I'm actually going to take a couple minutes here and read you from Revelation chapter 9 about the fifth trumpet judgment, so you get an idea of just how destructive these locusts are. Now, these locusts in Revelation 9 are not insects. They're actually bigger than that, but they're like locusts. Revelation 9:1. The fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. That would be a demon. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. That's where hell is. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and the sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss. A massive thing of locusts are coming out. And out of the smoke, locusts came down upon the earth and were given power like that of scorpions. So they had the ability not only to land on you and eat you, but they had the ability to sting you like a scorpion. Right? They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plants. So they're different. The ones in Revelation are different from the ones we're going to see here. They're not going after plants, but only those people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. So the only thing that these locusts are going to go after is people who are not with God. They were not given the power to kill them, so they couldn't kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months. So for 5 months, these things are attacking people that are not with God and torturing them. You would think after about 5 minutes of that, you would say, okay, God, I'm with you. Yeah, but apparently that didn't happen. Many of them stayed like that for 5 months. And the agony they suffered was like that of the sting of a scorpion when it strikes a man. I've never been stung by a scorpion. I've had my share of bee stings, but never a scorpion. But I hear they're pretty painful. During those days, men will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. So for 5 months, people will be stung by these things, and they'll want to die, but God's not going to let them die. He's not going to allow that. Imagine that. God will not allow you to die. The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. On their heads they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. So these are not really insects in the classic sense. They start out looking like insects, but they change. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth was like lions' teeth. Imagine teeth. Teeth on a locust, right? They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. And then it goes on and on. They had tails and stings and all this stuff. So let me move next to what Joel had to say about this. And this is in Joel 1 and 2. Take me a minute to find that here. Joel's one of those books that's a little challenging to find. Shortly after Micah, I think. Nope, after Nahum. Joel, wherefore art thou? Okay. Here he is. Okay. So Joel chapter 1, and we're going to look at verse 4 first of all. What the locust swarm has left, the great locusts have eaten. What the great locusts have left, the young locusts have eaten. What the young locusts have left, other locusts have eaten. So here it's talking about how they just are destructive, and they just eat everything. They just go after everything and eat everything. What Joel's looking forward to here, or not looking forward to, but what Joel is prophesizing here is the same period we just looked at in Revelation, the period that will come in the future. So this is Joel's view of what we just read in Revelation. So let me continue on and look at Joel 2, 1 through 9. Blow the trumpet in Zion, sound the alarm on my holy hill. Let all who live in the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. That's the tribulation. The day of the Lord is the tribulation. It is close at hand, a day of darkness and gloom. We're going to talk about darkness later today as well. A day of clouds and blackness. Like dawn spreading across the mountains, a huge and mighty army comes, such as never was of old, nor ever will be in ages to come. That is the army of the Antichrist. They're going to come like locusts and devour the land. Before them fire devours, behind them a flame blazes. Before them the land is like the Garden of Eden, behind them a desert waste. Nothing escapes them. So this is all about what's happening, what's going to happen when the Antichrist's army attacks Israel during the tribulation. They have the appearance of horses, just like what we just read in Revelation. They gallop along like cavalry, with the noise like that of chariots. They leap over mountaintops like a crackling fire, consuming stubble, like a mighty army drawn up for battle. At the sight of them, nations are in anguish. Every face turns pale. They charge like warriors. They scale walls like soldiers. They all march in line, not swerving from their course. They do not jostle each other. Each marches straight ahead. They plunge through defenses without breaking ranks. They rush upon the city. They run along the wall. They climb into the houses like thieves. They enter through the windows. So they're like locusts. They will behave like locusts. Again, this is the Antichrist's army. But they will come into the city that way. And Joel goes on in 2:25 also, which I'm going to jump to that next. I will repay you. So this is God speaking now of what he will do. I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. The great locust and the young locust, the other locusts and the locust swarm, my great army that I sent among you. So God is talking here about the millennial kingdom that will come after the tribulation, how it will be a wonderful time where people will be healed from what has happened before that. So that's about locusts, and let's get into reading about them now in our reading today about the eighth judgment, which is the judgment of locusts. By the way, if you're watching at home, you can download the notes from the class on your screen. Just click the download piece. It's a link. If you don't have the actual scripture there, so to Exodus chapter 10, we're in verse 1 here. So Exodus 10, verse 1 and verse 2. Then the Lord said to Moses, Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his officials, so that I may perform these signs of mine among them, that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I dealt harshly with the Egyptians, and how I performed my signs among them, that you may know that I am the Lord. So this is similar to what we've heard before, as God has told Moses to go talk to Pharaoh, but there's something different here. He's giving Moses a different reason here than what we've seen yet. Let me go through that. Well, he says to go to Pharaoh and do it, but then he says that I may perform these signs of mine among them, that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I have dealt harshly with the Egyptians. So up until now, it's been about Pharaoh's going to see my power, his people are going to see my power, the Jews are going to see my power. That's been what God has been telling Moses until now. Now we hear something new. Now he's saying, by the way, you're going to tell your children and your grandchildren about this. This is going to be part of what's going to go forward with you into future generations. And even today, we tell our children and our grandchildren about what God did in Egypt during this period. So it goes all the way down to us today. And that's part of the responsibility we bear as Christians. Once we've accepted Christ, we don't just walk away and say, great, I'm going to be saved someday. we have a lot of responsibilities, and Andy talked about some of them this morning, but one of the key ones is to pass that knowledge and that understanding to our children and help our children to understand the importance and the necessity of committing their lives to Christ as well, just as we have done with us. So this is one of the first places in the Bible where God talks about that, is right here in this verse. He says, and then he goes on to say, not only tell them, but and know how I performed my signs among them, that you may know that I am the Lord. And the word Lord there is all caps, which means it is Yahweh. That is God's name, Yahweh. I am who am. We sang that this morning in church as well. So let's move on now to verse 3. So Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh. This is now the 9th time Moses goes in front of Pharaoh. If you've been keeping track, I have. This is the 9th time that Moses goes in front of Pharaoh. Moses goes in front of Pharaoh and says to him, this is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go so that they may worship me. But if you refuse to let them go, I will bring locusts into your country tomorrow. He goes for the 9th time, stands in front of Pharaoh. He's got to be getting... First of all, Pharaoh's the most powerful guy in the world, remember that. And he's got to go stand for the 9th time and threaten Pharaoh, right? That's obviously God's protecting him, but he's got to be pretty fearful going in and doing that. Pharaoh keeps telling him, no, I'm not going to do it. Get out of here. He comes back and brings one more threat in against Pharaoh. So this is what the Lord God says. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? So he's saying to Pharaoh, Pharaoh, you are not accepting God. You are not accepting him. You are not humbling yourself to him. You are not worshiping him. You need to do that. Well, as we're going to see, Pharaoh will not do that. He simply will not do that. Let my people go so that they may worship me. And then he said, and then here comes the threat. If you refuse to let him go, I'm going to bring locusts into your country tomorrow. Everybody in that part of the world knew what that meant. When locusts show up, and they don't show up all that often in that part of the world, but when they do, they devour everything. They just come in like a big wave of darkness into the land, and they devour everything. So the people realize that when that happens, the crops are gone, the animals are dead, everything happens, everything dies when that happens. They will devour what little you have left. Oh, they will cover the face of the ground so that it cannot be seen. So you won't even be able to see the ground. It will be so dark. That's how many of them there will be again. 80 to 200 billion per square kilometer. That's a million per square kilometer. It's incredible numbers of insects. Imagine them buzzing around and the sound. I've never been around them, but the sound of as they're rubbing their legs together, and it's the screeching sound. Just imagine the sound of that around you.
Sound you wouldn't forget.
Yeah, I'm thinking you wouldn't, yeah. And everybody knows it's destruction. So they're going to devour what little is left over after the hail. Because the hail, when the hail hit anything that was when the hail hit people and animals, it killed them. It also killed, remember, the wheat and one other, it wasn't the wheat. The wheat, anyway, it killed the barley and one other crop last week. So it killed various crops. So now, what little crops are left after all that, the locusts are going to come in and they're going to devour. And it goes on to say, they will fill your houses and those of all your officials and all the Egyptians. So they're going to come in through the doors and under the cracks and through the roofs and through the windows and wherever. They're going to be everywhere. They're going to be everywhere inside your house. Imagine all these zillions of grasshoppers in your house, letting off these incredible sounds in your house and eating everything, all your food, whatever's in there. They will fill your houses and those of all your officials and of all the Egyptians. So they're going to be in Pharaoh's house. He's going to get them. They're going to be in the house of all of his officials, all of his people that are around him, and of all the Egyptians. Now, who's left out of that? The Jews, right? So the Jews don't have to worry about this. The Jews are not going to see a single grasshopper or a single locust. They're going to go everywhere else in Egypt, but not to the Jews. The Jews are not going to see them. They will devour what little you have left after the hail, including every tree that is growing in your field. So they're going to strip the bark off the trees. The trees will die. There'll be nothing left but just, looks like features from a graveyard when they get done. Something neither your parents nor your ancestors have ever seen from the day they settled in this land until now. So this is not only going to be a horrendous locust swarm, but it's going to be the worst ever. It's going to be the worst locust swarm ever. The only one that's going to compare to it is the one that's coming here in Revelation when it hits Israel in Revelation. This is going to be the worst one ever. Then Moses turned and left Pharaoh. So Moses comes in, says, "Hi, Pharaoh, I'm going to give you some more bad news. Here's the bad news. If you don't let my people go immediately, you're going to get, your land is going to get covered with locusts. That's going to happen tomorrow." And then he turns around and walks out. Not dismissed. He doesn't ask to leave. He just leaves. A couple of other interesting things about this. Locusts, by the way, are kosher. I don't know if anybody knows that. If you read through Deuteronomy, Leviticus, locusts are kosher. And who's the famous person in the Bible that ate locusts?
John the Baptist.
John the Baptist ate locusts and honey. That was the thing. And that's totally kosher. It was just fine. A lot of stuff, by the way, that we eat every day is not kosher. And God gives us kosher because kosher is good for us. It's good for your body. So God told the Jews way back when stuff that modern science is still discovering today about what's good for you and what's not good for you. You notice God didn't say eat a lot of saturated fat. Okay, certain things God didn't put in your diet back then.
Don't eat a lot of sugar.
Yeah, don't eat tons of sugar. Right. Don't drink a lot of alcohol. So, but God did tell people they could eat as many locusts as they wanted to. So locusts are a good source of protein, apparently. I don't know, but apparently they're a good source of protein, and John the Baptist imbibed in those. Okay, let me continue on to where we were here. Let's see, we were in verse 6. So in verse 7, let's see what happens next. Pharaoh's officials said to him, "How long will this man be a snare to us?" So Pharaoh's officials, the people around Pharaoh, his leaders, whatever, all the people around him that kowtow to him, what do? Normally they just shut up and listen to whatever he says. I mean, he's supposed to be kind of a god, remember? Pharaoh's supposed to be a god to them. So what he says goes. What are they doing? They're questioning him, right? They're saying, "Hey, Pharaoh, do you really know what you're doing here? Do you know what's going to happen if a bazillion locusts come on this country tomorrow? Do you really understand what that's going to mean for us? Some of us have seen locusts before. We know what that means." So they're questioning him. Imagine the scene of Pharaoh, who's used to never being questioned by anybody. All of a sudden, the people that work for him are questioning him. We're starting to see that the people around him are starting to realize something's wrong here, and Pharaoh's not getting the message, right? Pharaoh is obviously in a world of his own, and he's not listening, he's not paying attention. He doesn't realize where this can go and how bad this can be for his country. So let's continue on. Let the people, how long will this man be a snare to us? So Moses, so why don't you just kill Moses? Maybe that's the solution, right? Well, God's not going to allow that to happen, so that's not going to happen. Let the people go so that they may worship the Lord their God. So they're saying, Pharaoh, do it. Let him go. Imagine that. This godly person is up there saying, or this person who thinks he's a god and people around him think he's a god is up there saying, here's what I've decided to do, and the people out there are questioning him. People that could lose their heads for questioning him, and they're saying, let them go. We've had enough. We've had all this stuff. Now we're about to get locusts. This has been horrendous. Our country is dying out here, and you are just being prideful about it. Let them go. Let them go, Pharaoh. Let the people go so that they may worship the Lord their God. It's all about worship. This really is God. So the people, even the people closest to him, whose hearts were pretty darn hardened by this point, are starting to say, let them go. Let them out of here. Do you not yet realize that Egypt is ruined? So Egypt is, after all these things, Egypt is ruined already. It's about to get even worse when the locusts come. By the way, speaking of locusts, something you may not have realized, about 5 years ago, we rarely see locust infestations in this day and age. We have insecticides and things like that people can use to keep them down. Even in parts of Africa where they still happen occasionally, they're rare, and when they are, they usually can be knocked down pretty quickly. About 5 years ago, there were 2 major locust infestations that occurred in the world at the same time. The cute thing is where they occurred. One was in Las Vegas, Nevada, Sin City, right?
I didn't remember that.
It was one in Las Vegas, Nevada, and the other was in the Grand Mosque in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, which is where the central place of Islam. At the same time, they both had locust infestations about 5 years ago. It made the newspapers in a lot of places. They showed pictures of all these brooming up zillions of locusts out of the temple over there. And of course, they were all over the city streets in Sin City. So, I don't know, maybe God was sending us a message with those 2. It's interesting, they haven't been much of any place else, but they went to those 2 places about 5 years ago. So, interesting.
Nothing by chance.
Yeah. When it comes to locusts, there is no leader, so nobody's out there leading them. It's not like a queen bee. There is no queen bee with the locusts. So somebody's making them do what they're doing, and it's obviously God, right? So, at any rate, moving on. Then Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh. Now notice this time they didn't ask to see him. He brought them back. He brought them back. And he says, go worship the Lord your God, he said. They won, right? Sounds like it. They won, right? It's over. We don't need to go on with these other plagues. Everything's good, right? Go ahead, go leave, worship the Lord your God. By the way, this is the 10th time now that he's gone in front of Pharaoh, if you are keeping track, and I am. The 10th time he has been in front of Pharaoh. So go ahead, take your people, go, right? And then he says, go worship the Lord your God. And then he says, but tell me who will be going. So he's still negotiating with God, right? He is still trying to negotiate with God, even after all these catastrophes that are coming on him and his people. He still has enough pride that he wants to negotiate with God. So tell me, who's going? Moses and Aaron. Moses answered, we will go with our young and our old, with our sons and our daughters, with our flocks and herds, because we are to celebrate a festival to the Lord. So we're going to go. We're going to take everybody, old, young, men, women, kids, sons, daughters, sheep, goats, everything, all of our flocks, all of our herds, everything. Whatever is ours that can walk, we are taking out of Egypt. That's what he said. What does Pharaoh say? What do we expect him to say? Is, yeah, of course, take it all, right? Go ahead. Well, no, he didn't. He still wants to negotiate with God. So let's see what Pharaoh says. Pharaoh says, the Lord be with you. Sounds positive. Sounds like a positive response, right? Yeah, go ahead. The Lord be with you. When I was growing up in the Catholic Church, the Lord be with you was a part of every Mass. It was called Dominus Vobiscum. And that says the Lord be with you in Latin. As an altar boy, I had to learn that, so I recognize that phrase. The Lord be with you. If I let you go along with your women and children, clearly you are bent on evil. Why? Why does taking your wives and children mean that you're bent on evil? No, have only the men go. In other words, guys, you can leave, but leave the women here. They're going to be hostages to us to make sure you come back, right? That's not the deal. The deal is not the men are going to go away for a couple days and go camping in the woods someplace and then come back and come back to the ladies. That's not the deal. The deal is everybody leaves. So he's still trying to negotiate with God. He's still fighting with God about this thing. No, have only the men go and worship the Lord, since that's what you have been asking for. That's not what he's been asking for, but that's what Pharaoh is pretending he has been asking for. So Pharaoh's lying here. Then Moses and Aaron were driven out of Pharaoh's presence. So this time they are forced out. Remember the last time they got up and left, and they weren't even excused by him. This time they are forced out. The guards push them out the door, right? So what do you think is going to happen? You think we're going to see locusts? Yes, we are. Verse 12, and the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over Egypt so that locusts swarm over the land and devour everything growing in the fields, everything left by the hail. So God says, okay, we're going to go ahead and do this. So Moses goes out, and he tells Moses to go do it. So verse 13, so Moses stretched out his staff over Egypt, and the Lord made an east wind blow across the land all that day and all that night, and by morning the wind had brought the locusts. Whenever something in the Bible is coming from the east, it's usually not good news. Okay? There's a lot of things. Take a look through Revelation, all the things that come from the east in Revelation. When something in the Bible is coming from the east, it's usually not good. So here we have a wind coming from the east. What's it bringing? Locusts. Billions of locusts. Remember, billions of them. Billions of locusts. So in the next 24 hours, the winds blow, the locusts come in. By the next morning or the next day, the locusts are everywhere. By morning, the wind had brought the locusts. They invaded all Egypt and settled down in every area of the country in great numbers. So did they just go to Pharaoh's house or just to the Nile Valley? No, they went everywhere in Egypt. Wherever there was anything green, they were there. They devoured everything. Never before has there been such a plague of locusts, nor will there ever be again. So God is telling us this was the greatest plague of locusts ever to hit the world, and it will never be this bad again. There have been plagues of locusts since then, but it will never be this bad again as it was then. They covered all the ground until it was black, so you can't even see the ground. The ground is nothing but insects. You can't see the ground at all under this. They devoured all that was left after the hail, everything growing in the fields and the fruit on the trees. So trees, grass, the plants, the crops that didn't get taken out by the hail are now eaten up by the locusts. Everything is done. By the time you get done, it looks like a moonscape, right? Just some branches of trees with nothing on them and no bark on them. So all the trees die, all the crops die, any animals that are out in the field die. These things eat up everything. Pretty awful. There's nothing left. By the way, they're going to eat up all the grain that you plant for next year's crops too. Everything growing in the fields and the fruit of the trees. Nothing green remained on tree or plant in all the land of Egypt. So there's nothing green left. It's all devoured. What does Pharaoh do? He summons Moses back again. This is now the 11th time, right? Pharaoh quickly summoned Moses and Aaron and said, I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Sounds good, right? Moses is asking God's forgiveness. Well, maybe not. We're going to find out. But Moses at least acknowledges his sin. I'm sorry. Pharaoh at least acknowledges his sin. I got the wrong person here. Pharaoh at least acknowledges his sin. Whether he's really sorry for it, we'll see in a minute. And whether he's really looking for God's forgiveness of it, we'll see in a minute. But at least at this point, he's acknowledging that he's a sinner. I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. So he's saying, not only did I sin against God, but I sinned against you. Now forgive my sin once more. So he's asking for forgiveness. Sounding pretty good, right? Pharaoh's asking for forgiveness. Or is he? First of all, he says once more, as though I've done this before and it didn't really work. So let's try it again. Huh? It's like banging your head against the wall. Eventually you hope if you bang your head against the wall, you'll knock a hole in the wall and get through. But that's not really how it normally works.
It's interesting. No, this is the, what have I got, the NLP? It's interesting, they say, forgive my sins just this once.
Mine
I
says one more time.
But it's just interesting. It's like, wow. Just this once or one more
Welcome
time.
to translations. I don't know. One of the things when you're studying the Bible, and this is a great lesson, when you're studying the Bible, look at different translations, especially if it looks a little questionable to you. Look at different translations, because different translations will give you different ideas. It's interesting. I think I've told this story before. When Deb and I were over in Israel a number of years ago, we studied at the Aish HaTorah, and it's a place where they educate Jewish rabbis. And I got together with one of the rabbis after the class, and I said, all right, so I didn't grow up with Hebrew like you guys did, right? I don't know Hebrew. I mean, I've taken a class in Hebrew, but I don't really know it like you guys do. You've lived with it every day of your lives. You guys have studied the Bible in Hebrew all of your lives. How do I get a good English translation that you guys really think is accurate? And the guy, very wise old gentleman, said, there's two Jewish translations I recommend. One is the Tanakh, and the other is the Koren translation. He said, get the two of those. They both translate the Hebrew into English. They actually show the Hebrew in the English. And he said, compare the two. If they say the same thing, they're probably right. If they say different things, they're both probably wrong. It's interesting. In other words, when you start getting translations that vary, chances are it's difficult to translate, and you better look at a lot of them, because if you look at a lot of them, you'll get a better understanding of them. And that gives us an incentive to really take a passage in the Bible and really study it and look at a bunch of different translations. There are a whole lot of different places for that. Deb?
Well, one of the things we discovered in talking with them is that they're translating this from the original Hebrew. And like any language is fluid, and it changes throughout history. So what may have had a certain meaning back then may be a different meaning today, and they don't use vowels. They only use consonants. So if you think of the different ways, you take 3 or 4 letters, you could come up with 2 or 3 different words using those same letters. And so you have to be really careful when they're translating. So that's why you get these variations even in the Hebrew to English, because the original Hebrew is much different than what it is today.
One of my favorite things to do is to take the first two chapters of Genesis and go through, look at a whole bunch of different translations, and try to figure out where the differences are. And based on that, you get an idea of where some of the complexities are in the creation story, and it helps you to understand, rather than just taking one version that you've read and say, well, this is it, this is how it really happened. When you've looked at a whole bunch of them, you begin to get an understanding that things are a little bit more complex than you might have thought in the creation story. More questions on that? Yeah, so Moses comes in for the 11th time to see Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, now forgive my sin once more and pray to the Lord your God to take this deadly plague away from me. A couple of interesting things here. He says, pray to the Lord your God. Whose God is this anyway? Is this just Moses' God? Wait a minute, supposedly Pharaoh just said, I'm a sinner, give me forgiveness, right? So why isn't it his God? It's not his God. He hasn't accepted him. Pharaoh has not accepted God. That's the basic problem here, right? Here's God performing all this stuff around him. Anybody could have said, wow, God, you are really it. You are really it. Anybody else sitting there, and probably half of Egypt at that point, by the time you get to this point, is saying, you really are God, and I really do believe in you. But not Pharaoh. Okay, Pharaoh's not there yet. Whether he ever gets there, we'll see. He really never gets there. But so that's an interesting thing. He says, pray to your God. And then he makes the same mistake. He says, I'm not going to do the praying myself. I want you to pray for me. Now that's how we get saved, right? We ask somebody else to go pray to God and save us. That's not how it works. That is not how it works. If we want to be saved by God, we have to do it ourselves. We can't go have somebody else do it for us. We can't have Billy Graham come in and say a few prayers, and at the end of that, we're going to be saved. That is not how it works. That is not how it works. It's our hearts that have to be put in front of God to make this happen. Moses, and then he says, and then take this deadly plague away from me. So he wants the plague gone. He doesn't really want to accept God.
But
Moses,
it was away from him.
huh?
The wording is, take it away from him.
Right, away from him. Well, that's the other piece. It's him. Yeah. He didn't say, take it away from my poor people who are suffering because of my stupidity. He said, take it away from me so I don't have locusts eating me up and chewing on my flesh, right?
That just struck me,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. I actually made a note of that in the notes too. You'll see I made a note on that as well, that it's about him. It's all about him. Okay, Moses then left Pharaoh, and the Lord changed the wind to a very strong west wind, which caught up the locusts and carried them into the Red Sea. Not a locust was left anywhere in Egypt, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go. So Moses goes, he goes out and prays to God, because Pharaoh asked him to. He goes out and prays to God. God does what Moses asked. Poof, the west wind comes. The good stuff comes from the west. The west wind comes, takes the locusts and tosses them all in the Red Sea where they all drown. Evan, you look like you have a question.
No, I was thinking about something.
Oh, okay. Anyway, the locusts all go to the Red Sea, which is to the east. So the wind's coming from the west, pushing the locusts into the Red Sea, and they all drown and die. And
The fish had a good meal.
fish had a great meal. Yes, very fat fish.
Yeah, it's good fishing now.
Imagine a billion of locusts dropping onto you as you're a fish saying, thank you, Lord.
That's a good point. That's good.
Yeah, where was I? Okay. Not a locust was left anywhere in Egypt, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart and would not let the Israelites go. So we're down now to the end of this plague, and Pharaoh hasn't learned a thing, has he? Okay, then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward the sky so that darkness spreads over Egypt. Darkness that can be felt. Now that's another word. Check that translation and all your translate. You're going to find the translation of that is all different. The way I interpret that, from having read a couple different versions of it, is the darkness is total. You cannot see your hand this far in front of your face. There is no light whatsoever. There's no sun, there's no moon, there's no stars. If you light a fire, it doesn't light. If you light a lamp, it doesn't light. There is absolutely no light, is the way I interpret that thing. It talks about darkness that can be felt. Now you think about, there are times when you're in darkness and it's just creepy, right? It's just so dark that it's creepy. I think that's what they're trying to get at here. But many of your translations are not going to say darkness that can be felt, just so you know. So Moses stretched out his hand toward the sky, and total darkness covered Egypt for 3 days. 3 days, so it's only 3 days. Yet all the Israelites had light in the places where they lived. So up in Goshen, no problem, right? I don't know if they had the sun up in Goshen, but at least they had light of some kind, maybe lamps or whatever. Maybe they even had the sun out in Goshen. I have no idea. No one could see anyone else or move about for 3 days. Yet all the Israelites had light in all the places where they lived. So Pharaoh now summons Moses again, the 12th time. Go worship the Lord. Even your women and children may go with you. So yeah, I'm going to let you take your women and children. You don't have to leave them as hostages anymore. Sounds great, right? Well, not quite. He says, only leave your flocks and herds behind. Pharaoh, are you ever going to learn, right? God is not to be bargained with when it comes to your sin. You either are repenting of your sin or you are not repenting of your sin. To say, well, I kind of repent for part of it, but not all of it, Doesn't work. That's not how it works with God. Same thing here. Only leave your flocks and herds behind. So Pharaoh's thinking, hey, we'll eat the meat from your flocks and herds. Just leave them here. You guys can go ahead and go out in the desert. You won't have anything to eat, so you'll starve. So no big deal, right? But Moses said, you must allow us to have sacrifices and burnt offerings to present to the Lord our God. So Moses said, Moses sometimes isn't strong enough on how he deals with things. Rather than saying, no, we're taking them, that's what God says, he gives an excuse, right? He says, well, I need them for sacrifices. Well, that's true. The stronger way to have said it would have been, no, that is not what God says. But this Moses, as we can see, is still growing. He's not quite there yet. As we get deeper into Exodus, we'll see Moses gets a lot stronger. But Moses is still a little wishy-washy. You must allow us to have sacrifices and burnt offerings to present to the Lord. Our livestock, too, must go with us. Not a hoof is to be left. So he finally said it, but he threw an excuse in front of it first. He shouldn't have. He says, not a hoof will be left. That's a cute saying, right? Not a single hoof. So you can take 3/4 of that, but not the fourth hoof, right? Not a hoof will be left. Not a hoof will be left behind. We have to use some of it in worshiping the Lord our God, and until we get there, we will not know what we are to use to worship the Lord. So again, he's qualifying this in ways that he shouldn't qualify it. He is not there to say, we might need some of these, and we don't know how many, so we really need to take them all. He just needs to say, no. God says, we're taking them all, and that's that. Let us go. We're taking them all. But he doesn't do that. He still is wishy-washy. He will get stronger as we go through the book of Exodus. But right now, he's still wishy-washy. This is his 12th time in front of Pharaoh. You would think he'd be a little stronger by now, but he's still dealing with his own insecurities here. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he was not willing to let them go. So, is Pharaoh going to let him go after this ninth plague? Darkness? Not being able to see his hand in front of his face for 3 days? Nope. Pharaoh said to Moses, get out of my sight. Make sure you do not appear before me again. The day you see my face, you will die. So Moses is about to be chased out. We're going to see he really isn't chased out just yet. He still has a few more things to finish in the next chapter we'll get into next week before he actually leaves Pharaoh for the final time. Just as you say, Moses replied, I will never appear before you again. So Pharaoh's saying, get out and don't ever come back. Moses is saying, okay, I will. But he's not quite done with this visit, as we're going to see next week. Now, let's look at a couple of other things. Normally I put all the gods up here, but I didn't have enough time today because our very, very effective sermon ran over a bit. A couple things, and that's what about the gods of Egypt? How did they make out in all this? The two gods of Egypt that were hit by the plague, by the locusts, were Seth, who's the god of agriculture. Obviously, he didn't protect the crops. And Isis, who's the goddess of agriculture. Obviously, she didn't protect the crops. And then the darkness. Oh, here it is. The Egyptians mocked for the darkness would be Ra, who was their main god. He was the sun god. Okay, the sun was taken away. Khepri, Khepre, who is the eagle sun god. Usually I put this up here. I didn't today because I didn't have time, but it is on the last page of your handout if you want to see it. Khepri, who's the eagle sun god. Harakti, who is the hawk sun god. Apparently they have 3 sun gods in Egypt. Aten, who is the sun god, the sun disk god. Horus, who is the winged sun god. Atum, who is the god of the setting sun. Thoth, who is the moon god. And Nut, or Nut, I don't know how you pronounce it, who is the sky goddess. So God continues to mock the Egyptian gods and show them to be utterly powerless against him in all of this. So next week, we're going to get to the 10th plague, which is the plague that finally convinces Pharaoh to leave Egypt, and that is the plague of the firstborn. We're also going to get into the Passover next week, which occurs as part of the first of the 10th plague. By the way, you'll notice that in here we said earlier that God said, let my people go so that they can have a festival to me in the desert. That festival is actually not going to be in the desert. That festival is Passover, and it will actually occur in Egypt next. We'll see that next week as well. So that is the festival that God was talking about. It's the first ever festival that the Jews celebrated, was the festival of Passover, the first Passover. So I have about one more minute if anybody has any more questions.
I was just thinking, I mean, this is here nor there, but whenever I see the wind blowing from the east in the winter, I know we're in for a doozy. You know,
There are different places in the world, and different places in the world, things
at
are
least
different.
from my
but-
house, you know.
Yeah.
I know which is east and west, and
Yeah, when you go through Revelation and you see, the forces of the Antichrist come from the east, and they, in order for the forces to get there, God has to dry up the Euphrates River so that they can walk across, because God has destroyed all the bridges previously. So that's how they get there, is from the east. So the evil things come from the east in the Bible, basically, and then they come up. Right. Yeah. So anyway, that's how evil things get into Israel, is from the east typically. You'll see that whenever you see anything coming from the east in the Bible, it's usually not a good thing.
Remember the old sailors thing?
yeah.
Red in the morning,
Red
sailors
sky in the
warning.
morning, sailor take warning.
Yeah, red at night.
From the east.
Yeah. Well, the morning would be the east.
Yes.
So if it's red in the morning, it's probably not going to be a good day, right? If it's red in the evening, fine, no problem. It's going to be a good day tomorrow. So that is the thing.
Huh.
Other things?
You said that, who was the god of agriculture?
Seth was the god of agriculture, and Isis, I-S-I-S,
Is the god of who?
was the goddess of agriculture.
Okay, goddess, okay.
She's a female.
Goddess, got it. Thank you.
By the way, one of those gods that was in the locust places that we were talking about, it's Seth, the god, the
Right.
god of agriculture. Actually looks like an insect, looks like a grasshopper. So Seth, the god of agriculture, looks like a grasshopper. Thank you for asking that. Well, we're done. If anybody's got any more questions, I can stay here as long as you need. If we have other things, I'm going to shut this off.